Welcome back to On the Right Side of History with Kansans for Life. I'm Danielle Underwood, your host. Today, we're taking a moment to look back at the exciting highlights of 2025 for the pro-life movement in Kansas. This was not just another year, but one that was filled with real, measurable victories for life. It was a year where perseverance paid off, truth broke through the noise in groundbreaking ways, and pro-life Kansans stood strong and turned out in numbers to help. From legislative wins to powerful education and outreach efforts that are reaching thousands of Kansans. This was a year shaped by courage, creativity, and conviction. So today, we're celebrating what we've accomplished together and highlighting stories where grassroots voices made all the difference. In the studio with me now is Peter Northcott, KFL's Executive Director, Mackenzie Ayers, our Director of Communications, and Josh McDonald, our untiring grassroots manager. Welcome, team. I am so glad to be here with you in the podcast studio.
Thanks, Danielle. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, excited to be here.
This is a fun moment for us. I mean, it's, at the start of every year, we look ahead and we're thinking, oh my goodness, can we accomplish all these things that we're setting out to do? We have these huge goals and, so much effort goes into it, but it's so satisfying. I find it so satisfying, and I'm guessing you do too, to look backwards and just be like, wow, we got all of that accomplished in one year.
Absolutely.
So in our intro, I talked about we have all these things to be thankful for, the legislative victories and the amazing turnout at our March for Life. So I think, why don't we start there and just talk about that, because that really set us up for, it launched us into this year in a couple different ways, both our educational outreach and also the legislative session and what we were able to accomplish there. So let's talk about March for Life. Take us back to that, Mackenzie.
Yeah, so we had beautiful weather for one, but hundreds of people. I think probably the highest turnout, at least I've seen in my time here at KFL. And what a great problem to have, that I was standing on the stage getting ready to deliver remarks and realizing that hundreds of people were still marching down the street. And just when I thought, okay, everyone's here, ready to go, hundreds more were just kept turning the corner. And so
I think it turned into thousands,
yes.
actually. I know it did.
So many.
Looking back, it was amazing.
And so many young people too. The people up on stage had a great perspective, because you just got to see so many young people, and it was a wonderful day. And all of our pro-life legislators up on stage. It was great turnout for our March for Life.
It was memorable in a couple ways. One thing, for the interesting visitor who happened upon our event that day, which, we had this, we did a podcast on that and got to cover.
Yeah.
Peter, what did you think about that situation?
Well, I think, referring to, at least one or a group of Satanists showing up at our March for Life, and they were very clear with the fact that their values are opposed to the values of life. And the disturbances that they tried to create at the rally, even some profanities that were uttered at the rally, trying to shake people, get them uncomfortable. And, pro-lifers, they responded with, kindness at every turn. But it just shows, what we're up against. It's a battle of, good and evil. And we know which side, who's on the other side, who's on our side. But, he treated with kindness, continued to pray for that gentleman and that group. Unfortunately, they had an event at the Capitol months later that they dedicated to Kansans for Life and to others. But it's because it just shows the good that we are doing and the impact that we're having. Why he chose to come out there that day.
And it's honestly a snapshot of what the pro-life movement faces all the time. You'll have people, the opposition, they'll try to silence us, they'll try to distract and intimidate. But the pro-life movement consistently stays focused on the mission ahead, and we're so resilient. And so I think that's just a snapshot of what we're up against.
Yeah, and we proved we are unflappable. We are absolutely mission driven, and we can't be diverted from that. We can't be dissuaded from that. It doesn't matter what that opposition is that's thrown our direction. And we just keep on keeping on, right? We've got a mission. We've got to keep going. And the other great thing about the March for Life is that we were able to debut. At that point, it was really just the beginning of an idea that turned into a massive outreach project for us. Josh, do you want to talk about that, the display that we brought?
Yeah, so that was quite the adventure. Really, what became the basis for Aftermath was initially, thought of as kind of a standalone event to bring to the march to give people a tangible idea of the battle that we're fighting. And so it took a massive volunteer effort, and that's really the first thing that stands out to me about it, is just from that point in the year, way early, first month of the year, we had volunteers turning out in huge numbers at 6 a.m. showing up to help unload a van and set things up and watch over things, and really the feedback that we got from that then helped launch us into our biggest project of the year.
And I can just say, I mean, it's no coincidence we debut what became Aftermath. We have our guest that shows up. So we started off the year acknowledging what we have to acknowledge every year, which is Kansas being this abortion destination, but being able to show people what that looks like and the impact of people that came for the march. I mean, so many people left, they were visibly emotional by seeing 24 tables of the fetal models, but there were individuals that weren't there for the march that of course saw that, and they were touched by it too. So it was a great start to our year with the wonderful weather, the enthusiasm from the crowd, but Aftermath, really people seeing that display as they were leaving, and that leads into an incredible legislative year that we've had, and it's just the momentum just kept going. But the month of January, really, we started on a really high mark in so many different ways.
Yeah. So for people who aren't familiar with Aftermath, maybe this is a good time for us to talk about what that grew into, because it really was just like a seed that was planted, and we saw how powerful that impact was for people. And we thought, just one day in January in Topeka, Kansas, and the people who could get there, even if it was, the largest turnout we'd seen in decades, we knew that we needed to get to more people in more places all around Kansas. And so we just started as a team really ideating on that and coming up with ways that we could make this a truly educational moment. And so we developed Aftermath. Do you want to talk about that process, Mackenzie?
Absolutely. Aftermath is a response. It's a recognition of the 19,467 lives lost to abortion in Kansas in 2023. And as Peter said, that number's so large, people know it's large, but sometimes people need to see and visually see just how large that number is. And so our team came together and we started designing a traveling exhibit that spans the size of a basketball court, along with accompanying banners that explain how we got to this point in Kansas where we are a destination state. And it was one of my most favorite projects we've worked on. We wanted to make sure also, as we were creating this exhibit, that in this display, that we were being compassionate, because we know that a lot of the people who come through this, yes, they're probably with us on this issue, but at the same time, there's probably many people who might experience this display who have been impacted by abortion. And we wanted to make sure that we were simply presenting the facts and let people do with that information what they wanted after. And it's very, very compelling. We can talk about some of the stories that happened this fall, but that was kind of the creation process of it.
Yeah, and when you're presented with those facts, it is very difficult to not be moved, right? Be moved towards a pro-life position. And Josh, I know you saw this multiple times because you were at every single one of those 11 stops that we made, literally to the four corners of Kansas. I mean, we went to 11 different communities and held these one-day events, and they were usually 14, 15-hour days for you and whoever else from our team was with you, and the team of volunteers who were out there with you.
And they were outstanding because they just kept coming throughout the day. And, and that's what I was saying is January, it started with all these volunteers, and then that just continued throughout the year. And because, an event like this isn't possible without that kind of support. But exactly what you were saying. I mean, there were so many people. I lost count because I was trying to keep the tally in my head of how many people came through and started angry and offended when they saw Aftermath. And, by the time they left and they read the banners, they were like, I didn't know it was this bad. You're making this up. And I said, no, we're not. We pulled these numbers from the state's report, right? This is broken down based on the data from the state's report. This isn't, we didn't, make these numbers up. And at that point, I would watch them sit there and wrestle with it. And at the very least, they would walk away saying, this is too much and it has to be stopped. It has to be curtailed. So people who weren't pro-life at least left more pro-life than they were.
Can you tell the story about the young man who was traveling through and just happened to see one of these exhibits?
Yes.
'Cause that's a really interesting story.
Yes. So there was a young man from Indiana who was going to Colorado, he said, to visit his girlfriend who was, I think, wrapping up school out there. And he had a very small dog with him and decided in Hays, Kansas, of all places, that he needed to stop and walk his dog. So he stopped, got out near the display, started walking his dog, saw it, curious, walked up there. And I watched him because his body language was very kind of apprehensive. And so I was like, oh, okay, I need to see what's going on here, make sure he's like, I'm just going to let him sit with this for a second and see what he does. And he spent probably 30 minutes reading every single banner multiple times, walking through the display. He came and got our companion piece and then went back to do it again. And then he comes to me and he goes, okay, what you've got here is really important information. And I didn't know it was this bad. And that's crazy. Is this accurate? And I said, yeah, here's where we got the numbers from the state's report. And, here's how it's reflected. And I can walk you through the timeline if you need. He goes, no, I understand that. I have some questions, though, because I'm concerned about some situations, how, abortion might be handled. And so he started asking some questions to me and another very knowledgeable volunteer who was there. And it turns out most of his concerns were based off lies that he had been told. He had been misled for much of his life. And so we were able to kind of, correct some or point him in the direction of resources that could help him correct it. By the end of his time there, he probably spent 45 minutes to an hour with us on what was supposed to be a 5-minute stop for his dog. He's taking pictures and posting it on social media. And really just, he came not pro-life and left pro-life in an hour. And I didn't have to sit there and wrestle with him to open his mind. Aftermath did that for him. And then that was able to start the conversation that really kind of, sealed the deal for him.
I think that's the key word, is the conversations that came from that. And, we saw so many examples of parents who brought their young children and children of all ages, high school children, even their college age children, to start the conversations, these really important conversations. And there are just not enough places or opportunities for that help, that aid and assist a parent to start these conversations. And the Aftermath display is so beautifully done because it's so respectful to that unborn child. We have the sizes of these babies at the age of this, that they are losing their lives in our state. And, these medical grade, very beautiful models. And the children just could not resist putting their hands on those models. They wanted to hold them. And that is such a core memory that's being built for these children that helps them understand and take that pro-life identity into their own souls, their own, just so that they can claim that for themselves, that they are truly pro-life and that they understand this issue. And it allowed the parents to have that conversation about why it's so essential that we stand up for these little ones who have no voice of their own. So it was a really powerful moment. And we saw all kinds of different people coming through these Aftermath exhibits, people of all different persuasions, some who were fully pro-life, some who were kind of in the middle, didn't know exactly what they thought, but they moved towards a more pro-life position. And then a few who were adamantly opposed, those who were pro-abortion. But we know that that is a memory they will always have. and that can be a seed that's planted that can bear fruit later.
And I know we got to see, even in those cases, we got to see some of that fruit start to come even then. I mean, Mackenzie, I'm sure you remember, we were in one of the stops. There were some people who came and they wanted to have some conversations with you, and they left at least, seeding you some points. They were like, that's a good point. Like this needs to be changed and that needs to be changed, and still not pro-life, but at least seen some of the problems that were existing and or that exist still in the system.
One of the things that I saw too, when people would come, even if they were pro-life, they wanted to get more involved. They wanted to know what they could do, whether it was just be involved in a chapter. But many of them kept saying, we need to work harder and have more resources for women. I mean, that was what they came away with. It wasn't about shaming women, any of that. There was a sadness for just the number of abortions, the abortion travel. But there was a resolve of, we're going to go help women. We're going to create alternatives. We're going to strengthen our laws. We're going to work in our community. So it's a very, very sad and it's a heavy topic. And people walked away touched, but there was a resolve and there was a lot of good that came about from it. It was certainly not necessarily a sad walk away for a lot of people. It was more resolve.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Another great outcome we saw from that, and not just related to Aftermath, but really throughout the year, was the involvement of young people in this movement.
Yeah.
So incredibly exciting, the things that we're seeing, just in terms of who's volunteering and them bringing their friends out to these events, but then also getting groups started on their college campuses and bringing in more and more people to be part of this pro-life movement. And Josh, I bet you have some things you'd love to talk about with that.
Oh boy, do I. Yeah, so I mean, I remember, one young man who, as soon as he saw Aftermath, this young man, I think he told me he was either 16 or 17 years old. And as soon as he saw it, he was like, okay, explain this to me. So I walked him through it, and then he asked me to walk him through it again and again and again and again until he wanted to walk everybody else through it for the rest of the evening. And he did a fantastic job. And he's like, let me know when you're coming back. I want to do it again.
Yeah, and we had this something very similar happen in Salina, where a young college woman came and she walked through it for the first time. And she said, how long are you guys here today? And we said, we're here till 5. And she goes, okay, great. And then comes back several hours later with more of her friends so they could walk through it. So we kept seeing that over and over again.
That happened consistently, and or somebody would stop in on their lunch break and come back with their family. And then, and we had some of our college students come out to help, and those college clubs have been exploding, especially in the last quarter of the year here. We've seen I just found out this morning that our Cats for Life club is approaching 75 members here in their first year, and the KU club is not far behind in their inaugural year as well. And just the stuff that we're seeing come out of there, they're I mean, the resolve that you talk about people walking away from Aftermath with, they live it day in and day out, surrounded by opposition, and they're shamed for what they believe and called all sorts of horrible things, but they stand tall and they return.
I'm going to do a shameless plug for a previous episode where we had 2 of those leaders come on on this podcast and talk about some of the opposition they faced in establishing those chapters and getting things going. But they are just really, again, very resolved. They feel this so strongly in their hearts, in their minds. They want this to continue, and they want to bring more people into this, more young people, more people in their generation. So great things are happening. And, we also, I think this is maybe a smaller thing, but it was still kind of a big thing for us. We want to mention the scholarships that we had this year that also ties in these young people and gets them involved in the movement. We offered 5 college scholarships for young people who could demonstrate the good that they had been doing within the pro-life movement. And it was amazing to see all the creative ideas they had, and fun to see those winners come through and know that those are future leaders of the pro-life movement, just already getting started now at their young ages.
And really the kind of in the genesis of that idea, we were listening to them because they were telling us we want to get involved, but it's so hard with everything that we're juggling, everything that we're doing. And so it was a way that we could help support them as they're fighting this fight in a very busy, very difficult time of life. There's a lot for them to figure out, and it was really I loved being able to tell them, hey, we've got this scholarship program now, and watch the ideas start cooking. So definitely a lot of fun.
So plugging the scholarship that is on now and will be decided in May. Is that right?
In May, yeah.
It's due in May.
Yep. May 1st is when we close it up.
And
Yep.
if you want to find information about the scholarship or you're interested, it's kfl.org/students.
Excellent. So if you're a student, take note. If you're a parent or a grandparent, take note. Pass that along.
And that's open to anyone who will be a college student at a community college or a 4-year university who is full time in the fall of 2026. So you get the whole year to do your work. Definitely
Show your
check it out.
pro-life impact.
That's right.
Pro-life impact scholarships. Excellent. Okay, well, why don't we pivot to another really big thing for us to talk about, and that's the legislative victories, because this was another amazing banner year. We keep seeing it's almost an embarrassment of riches in that before 3 years ago, we had never overridden a
That's
governor's
right.
veto of any pro-life proposal in the State House.
That's right.
And now 10, correct?
10
veto overrides of the most pro-abortion governor in Kansas history. So
Yeah.
the legislators in the State House have been standing really strong together, very strong, united pro-life front. And, our grassroots members have been doing so much to help push those things across the finish line. So it's a collaborative effort to make this kind of pro-life progress. But Peter, I know that you would love to fill us in on some of that.
Well, yes, and I wish our colleague Jean Gowden was here with us. Actually, I think she was named one of the most influential individuals in Kansas, at least under the State House, which is funny if you know Jeannie. She's the most down-to-earth person. So when she
So
was told
humble.
that, it was just so funny, her reaction to it. She just started laughing. But yeah, this year, it was another year, 5 more pro-life policies passed, 3 more veto overrides, but 2 pieces of legislation that became law, either with the governor's signature or allowing them to go into law, starting with, which I think is an incredible piece of legislation. It shows the compassion of the pro-life movement, but it's just science. It's requiring that fetal development education is shown in middle school and high schools. When this proposal was put forward to the legislature, many thought this was already happening. But as testimony that was presented to the legislature shows, there's a gap in education. Very few students are learning about, the development process from conception until birth. It's a gap in education, and every individual in the state of Kansas deserves to know where they came from and how they got there. And so it was a piece of legislation that flew through the legislature. It's now being implemented across the state. Free resources available. There's a lot of content that's available that meets the criteria. Some school districts have been developing their own videos to show, but it'll be a 3-minute video. And so far, we're hearing great feedback from school boards, or it's becoming a non-event, which is wonderful that students are able to have this opportunity to learn about development. And so I think that was a great win for us. In addition to passing legislation that required that in child support proceedings that the mother's medical expenses are factored into that process. There was also a provision added on to give a deduction for any child that's born each year, and they did expand that too for cases of miscarriage or stillbirth as well. So just, the law is the teacher, pointing to the humanity of the preborn child, but also adding additional resources for mothers, I think is a good thing, and the legislature was strong. That was a veto override. The education bill was a veto override. And then securing an additional $1 million for pregnancy resource centers for our grants. So now we have a total of $3 million.
Which, by the way, is amazing. We've heard from pregnancy resource centers across the state that they have been, one center was able to purchase a new ultrasound machine to be able to help more women. Another center was able to hire a bilingual staff member. And then a third pregnancy resource center was able to open up another location. So we're already seeing the impacts of that funding, which is amazing.
Absolutely. No, and with pregnancy centers being, in some states and some governments that are really smearing pregnancy centers, it's GLAD who are providing alternatives for women, helping women in these very difficult situations, helping them put gas in their car, helping food on the table, job training, housing. It's good to see that our legislature is going against what some states are doing and targeting pregnancy centers, and we're providing more resources for women. And if I could just keep going through the tail of the tape on the legislative wins, so those three were veto overrides, and there are two other pieces of legislation. One that required that families who receive pre-birth diagnoses for their babies, that they are given a list of resources of what's available for them.
And that would be for like chromosomal conditions and
absolutely
things like
yeah.
Down syndrome or other disabilities.
Trisomy, yes. And so working with the Kansas Council on Disability Concerns, giving them authority to be able to reach out to parents and be a resource for them. Medical professionals, so many of them do such great work, but the human resource side or either the social worker side might not be their strength. And these are some very difficult situations of families when they get these diagnoses. So having an organization to be able to reach out who have experience, who have families that are members who are going through these situations, being able to tell parents of the resources they have available to them. And we know that children with Down syndrome are targets for abortion. The abortion industry has targeted them. And so it's just a way that we're pushing back with compassion in our state. So that law did become law without a veto override. And finally, continuing to help our friends and neighbors in the disabilities community. There's been decades and decades we've been fighting a battle to ensure that nutrition is not removed from those individuals who are facing medical complications or having certain diagnoses. So there's legislation passed to ensure that they're not being deprived of the food and nutrition that they deserve. Working with individuals like the Kansas Council on Disability Concerns and Disability. I'm sorry, on this one was the Disability Rights Center of Kansas and the Big Tent Coalition and others to ensure that there might be some things we might not all agree on, but we can agree on this point that these individuals deserve dignity and they certainly deserve food and nutrition, shouldn't be deprived of that. So continuing on the path of strong legislation passing, and I know we're going to carry that forward here into 2026.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might be a good time to just stop for a brief moment and just kind of remind people about our broad mission as a pro-life organization. We are here to protect every human life, every innocent human life. And so that, of course, extends from the baby who is pre-birth, so preborn babies, of course, their mothers. We want to protect them from a predatory abortion industry. We also are here to protect those who are aging and at the end of life, protect those who are medically fragile and have serious disabilities, any disabilities, because a threat to any human life and a devaluing of any human life threatens all of us. And we have to make sure that every human is treated with dignity, and that we recognize this is the human rights battle of our time. And so this pro-life battle, it's, sometimes people think of us in one of those fights, but really we're working on all of those areas. And so I think that was, I really appreciated that about this legislative session, that we were kind of able to stretch out and incorporate more things that we're doing already, but doing it at the State House, and that our supporters, our grassroots supporters, were able to be involved in all of those efforts.
Which we could not have done it without them. You guys, our volunteers and our supporters are amazing, and just the amount of messages that were sent to legislators to help get some of those things across the finish line, we could not have done it without them.
Yeah, I remember weeks where we had, some volunteer somebody would volunteer for, whatever outreach we're trying to do at the time, and and would say, hey, I've got a couple hours this week I can spare. And I'd be like, wow, that's so awesome. And they would end up doing 20, 30 hours with us in the course of the week.
Wow.
I mean, it just some unbelievable, people, the degree of generosity, just, I haven't seen it anywhere else.
I think we had, I want to say, was it over 700
Yes.
volunteers
we're
this year?
we're well over 700.
Wow.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
400 something alone just for Aftermath. But it's just a testament of the work we do, because there's so much more that has to be done. And so,
And I think it also points to how satisfying it is to get connected and to become part of this movement, because it's just so energizing to work with people who think like you do and who are passionate about the same things that you're passionate about. So we definitely invite anyone who's listening to this podcast and wants to be more involved. There is a place for you here. And we are so willing and ready to welcome you and get you plugged in and doing whatever it is that you're called to do and where you're gifted, because each one of us has gifts that we bring to this fight, and there's a place for each of us. So, okay, we've covered so many different things. I think the last thing before we wrap up, and we put a lot of energy and we talk a lot in the beginning of the year about our two big events that really help fuel so much of our work. First of all, they're great opportunities to be together with a huge group of other pro-life people. And so we have, 1,500 people who come to these banquets that we host usually in kind of later spring. And this year, of course, we had Rachel Campos Duffy of Fox News and Evita Duffy Alfonso come and be our speakers for that. Two great events. And the reason that I bring that up is because we just recently announced our next year's events, and would love to let everybody know.
So on Tuesday, April 14th, we will be in Overland Park. And then on Tuesday, April 28th, we will be in Wichita for our A Cause Like No Other banquets featuring CNN's Scott Jennings. I'm not a CNN watcher, but I do see a lot of clips online of Scott Jennings. He is the lone conservative on CNN, it feels like, and he is constantly battling back and pushing back against some of the things that they are on there saying all the time. But our theme this year is A Cause Like No Other, because truly when you zoom out and look at the pro-life movement from a 30,000-foot view, this mission is unchanging. And Danielle, you and I have talked about this a lot. A lot of the reason why I love coming into work every day is because this is a mission that it doesn't change. It doesn't move with politics and trends. The mission it's clear and it's ahead of us. And that's what this is going to focus on, a cause like no other. And so Scott Jennings is going to bring the same boldness that he brings to CNN every day, that roundtable, to the stage. And I think it's going to be really fun and a great opportunity to hear from someone who, like all of us, is pushing back in a culture where there's probably tons of opposition and people. He's in a Shark Tank every day. And I think we could probably learn a lot from him at these banquets. So we're really excited.
Learn a lot from him.
Yeah.
And where can people find information about those banquets?
All information is at kfl.org and on all of our social media accounts, Kansans for Life.
Yeah. So right now we're accepting sponsorships for tables where tickets will be available soon, but not quite yet by the time this podcast airs. But be watching our emails and our website, because we will be ready. We'll be ready for you. Anything else that we want to make sure we want to share about this year? Any other highlights that we don't want to miss?
A highlight for me, and it didn't necessarily happen in one moment, but it started in one moment. This is the first year where first full year where the pregnancy center tax credit has been implemented. So for individuals that donate to a pregnancy center, they're able to get a 70% tax credit. And some of our centers have shared some of those wonderful stories. So we have the grant program that we were talking about earlier, and Mackenzie was talking about some of the wonderful things that have come out of that $3 million grant, but there's also a tax credit that's available. And so when the legislation was moving through the process in 2024, and again, it was implemented, but it wasn't a full year. So this is the first full year. I remember having somebody that was around the State House for a long time come up to me and say, you're giving a tax credit to donors to pregnancy centers. Isn't that going to put you out of business? And they kind of said that kind of in a joking manner, but kind of a serious manner. And, I sat about it and I thought about that for a moment, and Jeannie was there with me. And we both kind of looked at each other and we said, this is why we do what we're doing. We're here to help. We're here to help women. We're here to help fight for the cause of life. In terms of donation, sure, we want pregnancy centers to have more donations, but we're not going to put a limit on God's generosity. I think that's one of those things that really stuck with us. So throughout this year, getting to hear all the wonderful things that have happened at the pregnancy centers, those resources coming forward, it's been wonderful. And we're having more pregnancy centers started in Kansas. So that's a wonderful highlight. But you look at it, for every dollar that's been invested in Kansans for Life, we've been able to help secure over $7 for pregnancy centers throughout the year. And so we hope that will continue. And there's things in the works that we can do in 2026 and beyond. But to the point of this being a cause like no other, like Kansans for Life, the point is to fight the battle for life. It's bigger. We're bigger than just one organization. We have members across the state from all across the political spectrum, different religious beliefs, some with no religious belief, united behind this cause. And so that's what this year has been. Of course, the abortion statistics have been heartbreaking and high, but our members have been more motivated than ever. In 2026, there's an election coming up. There's going to be a strong legislative agenda put forward, and we're just going to keep moving the cause of life forward and fighting the battle every single day with our members. So it's an honor to work with the people that are around this table and work with our members across the state. We're truly blessed, and this year has been a year of blessings.
That's a fantastic way to end. So, well, thank you to each of you for coming in here to the podcast studio with me today. This has been fun to recap. It's been a busy, eventful year. And these stories really remind us that when we stay committed and strategic, great things happen. So thank you for for everything each of you does. And thank you to all of our supporters also. We're so grateful for each one of you.
Yes, thank you.
And to you, our listeners, we appreciate each of you so much. You're our friends in this fight, and you are the true heart of Kansans for Life. If you're considering an end-of-year gift to support essential pro-life work in Kansas, please remember us. Our team here at KFL is in the trenches day in and day out, working to win hearts and minds so that the right to life, the first human right, is protected under the law and respected in every corner of society. You can make a donation on the homepage of our website, kfl.org, or by clicking the link in this episode's show notes. Thank you again, and God bless you this Christmas season and in the new year. Until next time, never forget, the pro-life movement is on the right side of history. Stay strong. The truth will overcome. Thanks, friends, and we'll see you soon.